Yes, Chair.
Okay, so thank you. So welcome to this expedited hearing, and I'll just deal with the procedural issues. I'm Councillor Philip Davis. I'll be chairing the hearing of Subcommittee A of the Licensing and Public Protection Committee of Birmingham City Council today. And before we start, could I just ask everyone to mute your microphones for the moment in order to improve the sound quality while I talk about the procedure? And could you also turn off your cameras, with the exception of committee members, unless you're the person speaking? We found this helps us with the bandwidth. Committee members will normally have their cameras switched on throughout the hearing. Could everyone attending today's meeting obviously make sure they're in a suitably neutral environment, the mobile phones on silent, etc., and so we can avoid any distractions. And it's because it's obviously vitally important that everyone can hear the deliberations today. Any distractions brought to my attention could result in the meeting being suspended temporarily or to another date and time under the regulations for these types of meetings. I can also confirm this is a public meeting and is therefore being live streamed on the City Council's website so the general public can see it. The formal agenda is as follows. Item 1, notice of recording webcast. I advise the meeting to note that this meeting will be webcast for live or subsequent broadcast by the Council's meeting YouTube site, and that members of the press public may record and take photographs except where there are confidential or exempt items. 2, declarations of interest. Members are reminded that they must declare all relevant pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests arising from any business to be discussed at this meeting. If a disclosable pecuniary interest is declared, a member must not speak or take part in this agenda item. Any declarations will be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. 3, apologies and notification of nominee members. I don't think I've had any indication of substitutions. It's an expedited hearing anyway, so we've called together 3 appropriately qualified members to hear this. So those are the formalities. Can I welcome you to this hearing to consider further representations made against interim steps following an application for expedited review in respect of the licence for Latin Parvo Bar and Restaurant, 88 to 90 Victoria Street, Jewellery Quarter, B1 3PA. As I said at the beginning, I'm Councillor Philip Davis, Chair of the Licensing Subcommittee. With me are other members of the subcommittee, Councillors Diane Donaldson and Councillor Mike Shaw.
Morning, Chair.
Thank you.
Morning, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. Also present in this meeting are the following officers: the Licensing Officer, David Kennedy, the Committee Manager, Mandeep Marwa, and the Committee Lawyer, Joanne Swampila. Okay, thank you very much. And now, firstly, let me ask the applicant to identify themselves as well. Mr. Mark Swallow of West Midlands Police.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Mark Swallow, West Midlands Police.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Jeremy Woodcroft of Keystone Law, representing Swan Taverns Limited.
Good morning, Chair. Jeremy Woodcroft from Keystone Law.
Thank you very much. And also present is Mr. Ido Idike, the DPS of premises concerned. Thank you.
Good morning, Chair.
So, good morning. Thank you. So, withdrawal of representations. Could I ask if any persons making representations, this will be addressed obviously to the police, wish to withdraw their representations at this stage of the hearing? Mr. Swallow?
No, I don't wish to withdraw the representations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So a little further on the procedural rules. I assume all parties have read and understood the Licensing Committee's procedural rules sent out the notice of today's hearing. Please note that given the nature of today's proceedings, I may at my discretion amend the procedural rules to reflect the fact the meeting is taking place online, but wish to assure you that all such amendments will not impact on the party's right to a fair hearing. We'll be using the chat function in Microsoft Teams to communicate. This is this icon you should have on your toolbar on the computer of a speech bubble, and use that to go into chat. I think people are fairly familiar with the chat function. Don't worry if you don't have that. You can indicate also in the usual way by catching my attention, or use the raise hand function, and I'll be notified that you wish to speak. We normally confirm access to chat, so if you could, and it's also helpful in terms of recording who's attending, so could you all at this stage just type in your name using the chat facility? We'll just a minute to do that. I'm about to type in my own name now. Okay, thank you very much for that. And I'm just getting everybody back on my screen. I can do that. There we are. Okay, thank you for that. And we keep the chat column open, obviously, for the duration of the meeting. If I don't think any participant has dialed in on an audio telephone, sorry, I'm getting some subtitles here for some reason, which is a bit off-putting. I'm going to have to try and turn this off. Okay, I think that's done it. That's okay, thanks. Right. Again, with the exception of subcommittee members, please keep your camera off unless you're the person speaking. For any problems with bandwidth which cause difficulty with the sound, I may at my discretion ask everyone to turn their cameras off in order that the meeting can proceed with everyone able to hear and be heard. Okay, so now we come to preliminary points. And again, this would be addressed to Mr. Swallow for West Midlands Police. And then I'll come to Mr. Woodcroft. Mr. Swallow, do you have any preliminary points?
No, Councillor, I don't have any preliminary points to make.
Okay, so I'll go to Mr. Jeremy Woodcroft. Mr. Woodcroft, do you have any preliminary points for the licensee?
No, sir, no preliminary matters.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so right now on to the process again. Firstly, I'm going to ask the licensing officer, Mr. David Kennedy, to present the report. Then the applicant, then West Midlands Police will be asked to present their case. And again, we're asking that be kept to around approximately 20 minutes. Then the licence holder, their representative will be invited to make their case. Again, 20 minutes will be allowed for that. And again, if parties can remember to speak clearly as they possibly can, because officers are taking notes by hand for the minutes, and this will assist the live streaming, those viewing it on live stream. If at any time it's somebody else's turn to speak, please mute your microphone, and you can use the chat function as described. Members of the subcommittee will be able to ask questions at any stage, but try not to do so until the conclusion of each presentation. Cross-examination by the applicant of those making representations will not be permitted unless the members consider it appropriate. Where questions are raised by members of the subcommittee or by those present, we'll use the chat facility to do that, or, as I say, indicate in the usual way. And if at any point you can't hear or having problems with your internet connection, please use the chat facility to alert the meeting manager. And then we'll take necessary steps to make a reconnection, or obviously adjourn the meeting if we cannot do that immediately. Could I point out that occasionally it may be necessary for the subcommittee to take legal advice. At my discretion, I may ask all parties to wait in this meeting while members and the relevant officers withdraw to take legal advice using a separate meeting with Microsoft Teams. We'll then return to this meeting and continue. Please note that if any time the live stream being broadcast on the City Council's website fails, I'll ask you all to mute your microphones and cameras and to stop speaking until the live stream is restored. If at any time the meeting goes into private session, the meeting manager will pause the live stream. Once the private part of the meeting is over, I'll ask the meeting manager to confirm live stream is resumed before we continue. Then at the conclusion of the hearing, I'll invite all parties to make a brief closing submission. And I stress no decision will be taken until all evidence has been heard. At the decision-making stage, the members and the relevant officers will withdraw from this meeting in order to determine the decision. They go into a separate Microsoft Teams meeting. In the event that the members need to clarify any point, you'll be telephoned by the meeting manager, and the meeting will then the members will then make their decision. Okay, well, that's all the process points. So we'll now move on to the meat of the hearing. And what I'd like to do first is ask Mr. David Kennedy to present the report, please. Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you, Chairman. West Midlands Police have applied for an expedited review of the premises licence in respect of Latin Parvo Bar and Restaurant, 88 to 90, Victoria Street, Jewellery Quarter, Birmingham, B1 3PA. The application has been made under Section 53A of the Licensing Act 2003 as amended, and has been accompanied by a certificate signed by a senior member of the force stating that in their opinion the licensed premises have been associated with serious crime and disorder. Copies of the application and certificate are published as papers A and B. This meeting has been arranged in order to consider whether it is necessary to take any interim steps in respect of the licence pending the determination of the review. A copy of the current licence is published at Appendix C. The interim steps that must be considered at the meeting today are modification of the conditions of the premises licence, exclusion of the sale of alcohol by retail from the scope of the licence, removal of the designated premises supervisor from the licence, and or suspension of the licence. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. So now I'd like to ask Mark Swallow, West Midlands Police, to make your presentation.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me?
Yes, I think we're okay. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. This matter concerns a premises called Latin Parvo Bar and Restaurant, situated at 88 to 90 Victoria Street in the Jewellery Quarter in Birmingham. It's a bar and restaurant that between Thursday and Sunday each week is licensed to carry out licensable activity between the hours of 0800 to 0400 hours the next morning, and on other days of the week that finish time is reduced to 0200. Premises were open and carrying out licensable activity on the evening of Friday the 25th of June 2021, going into the morning of Saturday the 26th of June 2021. It's been established that there were 4 door staff on duty who booked on duty at 2200 hours on Friday the 25th. On the 26th of June 2021, West Midlands Police received a telephone call stating that 3 males had been attacked with a machete on Victoria Street and had received substantial injuries. The incident happening at approximately 0400 hours in the early hours of Saturday morning outside the nightclub. The caller stated that the offender in the matter was a member of door staff that had been working at Latin Parvo at the time. On the 29th of June 2021, I attended the premises and spoke with the DPS and premises licence holder, Ido Adeka. He stated that the CCTV system, which I had requested access to see as per the conditions of the licence, was broken. He stated that he would contact an engineer in an attempt to retrieve the footage from the hard drive. This footage to date has not been provided. I have seen an engineer's report saying that the system was faulty at the time of the incident and nothing had been saved or recorded on the hard drive. The DPS, Mr. Adecco, did provide a list of door staff on duty at the club at that night. And later, when he's been given a description of the offender for the incident, he's identified one of these 4 members of door staff as being a person matching that description. That description came from inquiries made in relation to CCTV at neighbouring premises in Victoria Street. And I can say that CCTV footage from one of the premises does capture the incident and is now in police possession. What that footage shows is that approximately 0400 hours on that day, 3 males were outside the premises. They were in conversation with a member of door staff from there. Member of door staff then goes into the premises. Short time later, he reappears from the front door carrying a machete. The member of door staff uses this to attack the 3 males. He causes 2 of them cuts to their hands. These are obviously defensive injuries where they put their hands up to defend themselves. And the 3rd male sustains a 2 to 3 inch gash to his forehead. The males, in the end, make off to protect themselves. The matter was reported to the police and the victims had to attend hospital to have their injuries treated. 3 crime reports have been taken out for wounding without intent. That is against Section 20 of the Offences Against the Persons Act of 1861. This is a serious crime because it carries a maximum sentence of 5 years imprisonment on first conviction, which falls within the definition under the RIPA Act of 2000. Door staff are there for the protection of customers. In this case, the door staff are actually the people who attacked the victims after obtaining a weapon that was secreted in the premises. The weapon had either been taken in there previously and kept there, or it was taken in on that particular date. Premises licence holder has failed to promote the licensing objectives, and as a result of this, members of the public have been subject of a vicious and unprovoked attack with an offensive weapon by persons that are there in a position of trust to protect them. The premises have failed to promote the licensing objectives of reducing crime and disorder and promoting public safety. And they've also failed to comply with the premises operating conditions in that door staff were not wearing fluorescent jackets at the premises. They booked on duty at 2200 hours, not 2100 hours. And the CCTV, which is mandated to be working, was clearly not working at the time of the incident. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions from members? Councillor Donaldson?
No, Chair.
Councillor Sharp?
No, thanks, Chair.
Okay. I don't think there are any questions from me at this moment either. Thank you. Is that your presentation for the moment?
Yes, thank you, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Swallow. Okay. Okay, let me now come to Mr. Woodcroft representing the licence holder. Mr. Woodcroft.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Brilliant. Good morning. As I say, my name's Jeremy Woodcroft. I'm a solicitor. I'm representing the premises licence holder, which is a company which, as has been pointed out, a company called Swan Taverns Limited. They are, or the company's sole director is Mr. Adecco. Mr. Adecco is also the designated premises supervisor. The company was created to run this particular premises, and this is Mr. Adecco's first venture into the licensed trade. Somewhat unfortunate timing. I understand he took the premises on just as lockdown was taking hold. And he comes from a background of banking. He has a master's in banking and has spent 12 years working in that area. So he comes to this as a new venture, as it were. And you will gather from timing and also what has happened now, things have not gone terribly well so far. This venue, I understand, was already a premises with a late night licence, and Mr. Adecco effectively inherited that licence in its current format from that operator. Mr. Adecco would just point out to the committee that whilst this premises does have late hours, it doesn't operate as a nightclub, but is very much operating as a bar restaurant with food available throughout, and as the name suggests, a Latin theme. Looking firstly at the incident itself, I would ask the committee to consider that almost all venues do not directly employ their own door staff, but instead go through an agency, which is obviously what Mr. Adecco has done here. It is generally, therefore, the agency that engage and allocate door staff to a particular premises, and it is the agency that employ them. Post-lockdown, the premises had only recently started trading, and as such, Mr. Adecco had not had any real chance to assess or gauge the suitability of the door team that he was provided with. I think he says in the period leading up to this incident, he had only been trading for approximately 9 days. And there had been no previous incidents or behaviour on the part of the door supervisors he was allocated to suggest that there would be any kind of problem, particularly not a problem of this nature. There were, on the evening in question, 4 door supervisors on duty, as I say, all provided by Rhino Guard Security, who are apparently an established agency for the provision of door supervisors. And it is fairly clear from the description the police have given that one of these door supervisors clearly went off on a frolic of his own. I would ask the committee to consider that when an individual such as this door supervisor takes it upon himself to act in such a random way, a way that is clearly outside the parameters of what would be expected, it is very difficult for the premises licence holder or designated premises supervisor, or Mr. Adecco in both cases, to really preempt or anticipate something of this rather extreme nature. And indeed, certainly from Mr. Adecco's point of view, he was not aware that this incident had actually occurred. Now, Mr. Adecco is not a registered door supervisor, so of course, as the designated premises supervisor, his role would be more internal, authorising and supervising the sales of alcohol, and indeed his ability to perhaps participate or get involved with the running of the door would be very limited, because clearly he doesn't have the appropriate qualification. So he had to very much trust the professional organisation that had provided him with this individual. Subsequent to this incident, Mr. Adecco made various inquiries with the door staff company and spoke to other people, and the other door supervisors said that they were not aware of anything having happened. So clearly we assume, the police officers seen the CCTV, but we assume it was probably a fairly brief altercation, incident, whatever it may be. And clearly Mr. Adecco was none the wiser until the police informed him of such. So in relation to the incident, sir, what I would ask you to consider is that Mr. Adecco did what would be expected of him as far as the door supervision was concerned. Importantly, he had the register. Part of the conditions and the expectation on the licence is that there is a register with the names and badges and times checked. The police officer makes the point that they didn't log on until 10 o'clock when the condition refers to 9, but in fact the premises doesn't open until 10 o'clock. So whilst there is a reason for that, if you like. But Mr. Adecco was able to provide the police with the necessary register The register had the badges on there, it had the proper names on there, it had the proper times recorded as required. So Mr. Adecco has certainly fulfilled his role, if you like, as far as that is concerned. He had engaged, as I say, a reputable door company. And further, sir, you have heard from the police officer that when the conversation was had, Mr. Adecco was able to assist further by identifying who he believed from the description that door supervisor would have been. So, sir, I would ask you to consider that in relation to the incident, Mr. Adecco very largely did everything that he could reasonably have been expected to do. And obviously we have a sort of random act of an individual that would be very difficult to control. In relation to the CCTV, so this is very much a technical issue. Mr. Adecco is obviously, like most people, not an expert or specialist in CCTV. He inherited the system from the previous owner, an operator of the premises, and the condition on the licence says that it is a system that must be effectively ratified by the police or sanctioned by the police. So it having been a trading premises, it being something that he has inherited, it is perhaps not unreasonable for him to assume that the CCTV system that has been there and been working and presumably at some point okayed by the police was fit for purpose. It was only when the police requested the CCTV footage that Mr. Adecco really, on making investigation, discovered that he wasn't able to retrieve the information requested. One small point, so it's a very, very technical, factual point that I don't think has any relevance or indeed bearing on today, but I would just make it at this stage, just in case at the full hearing it becomes something of significance. Mr. Adecco is very certain in his dates that his first communication with Mr. Swallow was in fact on the 5th of July. I think Mr. Swallow makes reference to the 29th of June. Mr. Adecco recalled it as the 5th of July and has checked his phone, and that was the first communication he had. I don't think the date of first communication is that relevant, sir, but as I say, just in case it becomes relevant later on. So anyway, so when the CCTV was requested and the problem was discovered, Mr. Adecco contacted the specialist CCTV contractors to try and retrieve this information, and a report has been provided to the police, as Mr. Swallow alluded to, and effectively the report concludes that they got the system up and running as they describe it. They could see it up and recording, as they put it, and it was only when they dug deeper that the discovery was that the hard drive of the DVR, whatever that may be, was not functioning properly. So from Mr. Adecco's point of view, the electrical specialists say, well, yes, it was up, it was running, it was recording. So Mr. Adecco, at face value, would assume that it was working properly. And it was only when it was discovered that it was not retaining the information that it was recording as it should have done. As I say, a written report has been provided to that effect, and we can email that through should the committee wish to see it. Well, that CCTV has now obviously been rectified. I assume the hard drive or DVR or whatever it is has been replaced. And learning from this experience, Mr. Adecco being relatively new to the business, he is now going to implement a routine where he will check the system on a monthly basis, ensuring that it retains those images for the requisite 28 days as per the condition. But again, sir, it is a shortcoming on the system, and clearly Mr. Adecco has taken all steps that he reasonably could, A, to try and assist the police in their inquiries in relation to this matter, and B, to try and ensure that something of this nature does not occur again. So perhaps not surprisingly, if the licence is suspended today, it is going to have consequences for Mr. Adecco. As I say, this is his first venture into this licensed area, and he has already suffered the challenges of lockdown, particularly as it's affected the late night trade. He has obviously borrowed funds to refurbish and invest in this premises to make it as attractive as it is. He clearly has obligations on that financial side. He has rent still to pay, and he has approximately 11 staff who are clearly potentially at risk of being out of work. So the suspension today, sir, if that is the route that you were minded to go down, would have quite serious consequences. What I am going to ask you to do today, sir, and members of the committee, is that you have a discretion under the legislation to take various steps. And I would urge you to consider that there would be conditions that you could impose as an interim measure, stopping short of suspending the licence, which would give control to the police of the reopening of this premises, but also address the two issues that really have led us to this expedited hearing today. The first condition would be, and indeed Mr. Adecco has already taken action in this regard, would be that a new reputable door company would be engaged to the satisfaction of the police. Now, the police don't recommend door companies, obviously, that's not their role, but clearly if a door company is engaged that is perhaps a well-known company within the Birmingham environment, the police may be content to say, well, yes, we're aware of this company, we know they operate other doors without problems. So give control of that new appointment, if you like, to the police. Mr. Adecco has already been in contact with his existing door staff company and said to them, look, I'm sorry, whilst I understand it's probably not directly your fault, with the gravity of this incident, I cannot continue with you as my supplier. The second obviously pertains to the CCTV. And the suggestion would be, although the CCTV system has been fixed, that a condition would be imposed that the premises will not reopen until such time as the police have indicated they are entirely happy with the functionality in all regards of the CCTV system. And we wouldn't expect the police to be obligated to come out and check or anything. We appreciate the police have got enough on their plate. We would be entirely happy that the condition provide that we would provide them with such information, such evidence as they would want to see, so they can take an assessment and say yes or no in terms of the reopening. So I would ask you to consider that those conditions would address the two core issues of this review today. They would, as I say, also give the police control over reopening, but importantly, it would give the premises licence holder, Mr. Adecco, a window of opportunity to resolve the problems to the satisfaction of the police and potentially get the premises trading again and avoid the consequences that I have outlined. So, sir, from the premises licence holder's point of view and the DPS's point of view, those would be our representations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Woodcroft. That's very helpful. Councillor Sharp, do you have any questions?
I do, Chair. If I overstep the mark, please let me know. The solicitor was just saying that there was 4 members of staff outside on the doors, and when the incident happened, one of them went in, picked up whatever it was he picked up, came out and assaulted the other 3 people. While this was occurring, what did the other 3 members of the door staff do on that occasion? If I've explained that very well to you.
Yes, it's clear to me, Mike. So, Mr. Woodcroft, do you have any information about that?
Yes, what I can say is Mr. Adecco made inquiries with the door team after he became aware of the incident, which, as I say, was some time later after he was alerted to the facts by the police. He wasn't aware of it on that evening, and the door team told him that they were not aware of it either. Now, sir, one suspects they may be covering up for their colleague. Clearly, they all work together. They are all work colleagues. They are all employed by the same person, not Mr. Adecco. But yes, Mr. Adecco's inquiries met, if you like, a wall of silence.
Okay, thank you for that. Mike, do you want to come back on that?
No, that's fine, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, Chair. Chair, I'd like to ask, why was this weapon secreted on the premises?
Mr. Woodcroft?
Yes, again, a wall of silence from Mr. Adeko's point of view. The door team, as I understand the layout of the premises, have a sort of small area as you go through the door. Effectively, there is a small area where the door staff tend to congregate, and presumably, as the police suggested in their representation, it may have been bought on site previously, or it may just have been bought on site that evening. But from Mr. Adeko's point of view, obviously he was not aware of it. And as I say, subsequent investigations with the door team, who may, I won't say be in cahoots, but maybe be declining to comment, as it were, have not shed any light on that.
Are you able to tell us, Mr. Woodcroft, how long the relationship with this particular firm of door security providers had been going on?
Yes, sir, that is a key point. I think it's a very, very good point. As I say, Mr. Adeko was very unfortunate to acquire this premises sort of as lockdown bit. So he had only been trading with this door team for approximately 9 days, he reckons, before this incident occurred. So it was a very young relationship, but nothing to date had caused him or given him cause for concern.
Okay. Okay. Any further questions from members?
No, Chair.
No.
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, Chair.
Okay. Yeah.
Can I just ask how the licence holder went about making sure that the company on the door was a reputable company, please? Thank you.
Chair, I might have to just ask Mr. Adeko if he could answer that question. I don't know if he did any due diligence. They are certainly, sir, a company that has an online presence, and presumably, you know, he checked their badges, he checked to make sure that they were properly registered. But I don't know if how Mr. Adeko actually found them. So perhaps, sir, I could just ask Mr. Adeko to unmute and just answer that question.
Yes, fine. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, they have been gotten online, and we have checked with them. They told us that they are actually having a contract with a football club, Newcastle, and they have another contract with 101, and they have different sites all around the local area. So yeah, I thought that yeah, they since they had their SIA badges and all that, they have been vetted, and everybody they were going to supply to me was actually vetted as well, because they all came with their SIA badges, which I requested for before they even came into the business premises. So I checked all those things, and then checked the company online was duly registered and all that. So I felt that yeah, why don't give them a try?
So, sorry, you say why not give them a try? They were not. Was there a previous contract with them that you inherited when you took on the premises?
No, I didn't inherit the contract. The fact they were telling me that they had one of these, forgotten the name of the football club. I think it was Newcastle Football Club that they were doing the grounds. So that alone, I felt that it's a big company, that if they could have a football club doing the grounds of a football club, then, and having all the clubs, hospitality business-based clubs in Birmingham, then it was what's giving them the door.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Adeko, for that. Back to Mr. Woodcroft. I think we've probably completed our questions, Mr. Woodcroft. There'll be an opportunity for you to obviously sum up shortly, but thank you very much for that.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we are on to closing submissions then. So now back to Mr. Swallow, West Midlands Police, for your closing submission.
Thank you, Chair. This is a serious and vicious, unprovoked attack on 3 innocent members of the public outside of one of our licensed premises in Birmingham. I accept that this is carried out by the member of door staff, and Mr. Adeko says he has no knowledge of this. Mr. Adeko is the premises licence holder and he is the designated premises supervisor. He has responsibility for those premises. I said before that there had been a number of breaches of his duties. Although he says he has no knowledge of the weapon, in his premises he should have. A machete is not a small implement. It would be between 2 and 3 foot long. It's not something that can be hidden easily. It was in his premises. It has been used and bought out from his premises, and that is a failing. He has failed in relation to the operating conditions. Those conditions are already quite extensive. He has not followed those conditions. The door staff were not wearing yellow coats. His CCTV was not working. It should have been. Therefore, those issues have contributed to the fact that this person has been allowed to use a weapon to carry out this offence or offences. You're being invited to consider conditions. I would say in relation to that, there are already, as I said, strict conditions in place. They haven't been followed. Is there any reason to think any new conditions would be? CCTV, although there was no CCTV at the premises, there is also CCTV down at other premises which has captured the incident. It has not prevented it from happening. A new door company vetted by the police, I'm afraid, is not an acceptable proposition. The police are not in the business of recommending door companies for people to use. That would be an improper use of the police position. Other options you could consider were the exclusion of the sale of alcohol. This isn't an alcohol-related incident. This is 3 people trying to enter the premises and being confronted by a member of door staff. Removal of the DPS. Yes, you could consider that. However, Mr. Adeko is also the premises licence holder, so he will still have considerable influence on the running of those premises. So I would ask you to consider that the only course of action that is acceptable to prevent further incidents taking place is to suspend the licence until a hearing is held. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Swallow. So now back to Mr. Woodcroft to sum up. Mr. Woodcroft.
Thank you, sir. I will be brief. Really just following the line of Mr. Swallow. Firstly, sir, the machete, Mr. Swallow makes the point that Mr. Adeko should have been aware of this. As I say, sir, this is a door supervisor company. There are 4 door supervisors. One assumes that door supervisors may bring items with them to the premises, bags, lunches, whatever it may be, and presumably would have ample opportunity, given that they are the ones who are meant to be checking what's coming in and out the premises, to bring something of that nature in. So I don't think so that's necessarily fair to say that Mr. Adeko should have been aware of it, because clearly it is right that you are entitled to trust your suppliers, and effectively the door company are his suppliers. In terms of the other matters, as I say, Mr. Adeko has, I would ask you to consider, done what is reasonable. He is not a door supervisor himself. He would not be entitled to stand on the door, and clearly he would not be entitled to search his employees. Clearly he has also, as I say, fallen victim to technical failings on the CCTV system, but there has been no intent or malintent on his part. Indeed, he has done everything that he can to try and assist in this case. The suggestion in the conditions that I put forward, so, was not that the police recommend or endorse any kind of door company, but simply that Mr. Adecco find a door company that are known to the police, and effectively the police can then say yay or nay. Certainly we would not expect the police, as Mr. Swallow says, to be endorsing one over another, but clearly they will be aware of certain companies who perhaps have a better track record or do not cause them any problems. So, sir, I would respectfully suggest that the conditions are suggested are adequate, and would, as I say, give Mr. Adecco an opportunity to take control and give him that chance to establish his business and avoid the potentially serious consequences. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Woodcroft. Okay, so we've now reached the end of the hearing. So I'll ask all parties to leave the MS Teams meeting, and the members of the committee and the members, the committee lawyer and the committee manager will go into private session while the subcommittee makes its decision. You'll be notified of the decision of the subcommittee by the end of today. And thank you very much, Mr. Swallow and Mr. Woodcroft, for your assistance to the committee. So we will adjourn now to deliberate, but I'm suggesting a 10-minute comfort break. So if we reconvene at 11 AM in the private session, members, and then we'll make our deliberations there.